Daniel Womack, alcoholic. Hey, everybody. It's kind of weird standing up here telling my story, but sobriety date's August 1st, 1997. This is my home group. Good to see everybody here. Class of 97, that's right, Tony. And David. But I am going to tell you in a general way, try to, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. And do that in the next 40 minutes or so, give or take a few. I'm been a member of this home group about the same time I got sober. This group was brand new when I got sober. Been around about 2 months, I think it was. And so this group's been a big part of my sobriety from that day to this day. And so it's important to me. It's our anniversary is actually this month. And so each year I celebrate anniversary a couple of months after the group does. And one of the founding members passed away. Tom, y'all know Tom, passed away, and he gave me a pair of his shoes some years ago. I don't know why he gave them to me. I can't remember. I think he had one of those, what do you call those, impulse buys? You call it that. So he gave me a pair of shoes he had bought when he was down in Louisiana, and I got those shoes on today, hoping channel some of that spirit that Tom had. Any of you know Tom? He had a lot of get up and go about him. I don't know that I've ever met anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous that was more on fire about Alcoholics Anonymous than Tom. But yeah, and these shoes he had good taste. So I think about him when I put those shoes on. But I was born in Harnett County, which borders Moore County, and not too far from here, about 45 minutes from here was where I grew up, and it was a dry county at the time, and what that meant was you couldn't buy alcohol in the county legally, is what that meant. And but I could travel into Cumberland County, which wasn't too far away, or into Lillington, the town of Lillington, and which was always weird to me that you could buy alcohol legally within a dry county in a town. But it didn't slow down my drinking very much. I tell you what did slow down my drinking was finances and transportation. Those two things slowed it down. My first drink I had at 15 years old, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It had that big of impact on me. I don't know how big an impact the first drink has on you all, but I remember it. It was an experience. We talk about spiritual experiences, and I would say that was more or less like a spiritual experience. It was an eye-awakening moment. Up until that point, I was a guy that had a lot of trouble fitting in with others. I had a lot of trouble making friends, a lot of trouble, opening up and being honest with others. I kind of felt like I didn't measure up. I had the short end of the stick. I felt like the others that I looked up to and saw and identified with and wanted to be a part of, I felt like they had something I didn't have. And on any given day, that could change what that was. And when I would get what they had, then it would change again. And so I never quite felt like I had what I needed to be an equal in the world. And And the amazing thing to me was when I took that first drink, our literature talks about it, and the doctor's opinion describes the sense that came over me as a sense of ease and comfort. And that's exactly what it felt like. This sense of ease and comfort just kind of came over me the first time I drank. And I experienced that place that I felt in my heart that everyone else was already there, and I could not get there. And whenever I drank, I finally arrived. Is kind of what it felt like. And any bit of fear or any bit of not measuring up or not fitting in, all that went away. And to me, that was just a miracle, absolute miracle. And I didn't get in any trouble the first time I drank. I don't think I even had a hangover. It wouldn't be too much longer that every time I drank I'd have a hangover. But there to start with, I didn't. And I didn't have a blackout. And I didn't get sick. Nothing substantial like that happened. And so my first experience was a fantastic experience. And after that occurred, it just reoccurred in my mind over and over again. And I didn't know it at the time, but I had developed an obsession with alcohol, immediately. And it became something that I wanted to do over and over again. And I never could imagine, not wanting to do that or getting to do that, because it was that big of a deal to me. And I don't know that I was an instant alcoholic, but I can tell you that I was instantly obsessed with alcohol. And I think that's part of the illness. If we look in our literature, it talks about that the alcoholic drinks to experience that sense of ease and comfort, but also drinks to satisfy a craving. I developed this craving when I drank. And I don't remember when it occurred, but the easiest way I can describe it is when I began to drink, this thirst would come over me, and I would need to drink more to quench the thirst. But as I would continue to drink more, it's like I would just continue to get thirstier. I never could quite quench the thirst, and so I would continue to drink. And I would always think in my mind that I need to get to this particular place, buzz-wise or whatever you would say, and I just need to maintain this plateau of perfect buzz, if you will. And I would get there, right? But I would continue to drink, and it would seem like I would be there a little while, and then all of a sudden I'd find myself trouble talking, slurring my words, that kind of stuff, or I'd find myself difficulty walking. It would be like I would go from that place of euphoria, that perfect place, into this place of drunkenness. And it seemed like it happened in a matter of seconds sometimes. But I know that wasn't the case. But I've heard it described as overshooting the mark. And that would occur to me over and over and over again. And as I continued to drink and get older, I began to lose even that ability to kind of maintain that. It got more and more difficult. And trouble started happening. I started drinking at 15, so I had a little bit of, run there of no trouble. I didn't get my first DWI until I was 16. So I had some drinking in there. But and that might equate to not having driver's license. Is why it took so long to get that DWI. But and that was not a pretty scene. That first DWI I began to drink with another guy that was a friend of mine, and we were at somebody's house, and this guy didn't have any food or anything to drink, but he had a fifth of Bacardi 151. And we took that fifth, and it wasn't a whole fifth. They had broke the seal on it, but it was nearly a fifth. And me and the other guy continued to take shots of that 151 and chase it with water. And I was 16 years old. And we left that place and went to one of those places that you would go to buy alcohol in Harnett County. And known by different names, bootlegger, liquor house, one of those. And we were there, and some guy was buying us shots there, so we were doing those too. So we drank that 151, and we were doing shots there, and we decided we still needed more to drink. So we left and drove into Lillington and got 2 40s of Old E. That's Old English, top shelf. And began to drink that on the way home. The other guy was driving my car, and he wasn't drinking, I don't think, or barely drinking. He drives back to his house, which I assume is what happened because I didn't remember much about it. Then I find myself at home, so I assume I drove home. And in a blackout, of course. And I remember going in and out of blackouts or brownouts or whatever you want to call them over the next few hours, and coming to with someone beating on my bedroom door, and it was my friend wanting to leave and go visit his girlfriend. And so I got in the car and drove. We lived on a little driveway and had a pond, so it was like a pond dam, and you kind of drive across the pond here, across the pond dam. So it was fairly long, maybe 1/10 of a mile. And I didn't turn when I got to the mailbox. So you got a mailbox here at Wood Road, and I just went headlong right into the ditch and totaled my car in my own driveway. And put us both in the hospital. And I remember running to my grandmother's house to try to get help because I was bleeding bad, and I didn't know how bad I was hurt. But I was more worried about him because he said he was hurt, and so it turned out he had a sprained wrist. But, so he was hurt. So, and I think I broke my nose. So I ran all the way to my grandmother's house, and I remember standing on her linoleum and blood, going all over the floor. And I remember her asking me if she could get me something. What can she do for me? And she asked me if I wanted some milk and cookies. I remember it like it was yesterday. My grandmother. And now my grandmother, she had been around alcoholism for a long, long time. She had seen a number of alcoholics. My family's riddled with alcoholism. And I was at a dinner not long ago, and I seen one of my cousins, and I hadn't seen him in so long. I didn't recognize him. It was obvious the alcohol had aged him. And I remember we were going to buy some. We were going to get our food at the dinner thing we were at, and I watched him try to get his food, and he was like that. Not quite that bad, but almost. And so alcoholism's all in my family, and I could name all kinds of alcoholics in my family. We're not going to, but my grandmother had been around that her whole life, just about, and and it's just me, just another alcoholic coming along, and I remember telling her we needed to dial call an ambulance or whatever to get help, and I remember repeating to her over and over again, and I used to say dial 911, but I was saying dial 919, which was our area code, and repeating that over and over again. And of course, she was dialing 919, and wasn't working. And eventually, she was smarter than me, you know. I was pretty drunk, and she dialed my uncle, and my uncle dialed 911. So, but I had another uncle come to my car and threw all the liquor away before the highway patrol got there. And we ended up going to the hospital, and I ended up getting a DWI and a seatbelt violation. When you're sitting in the hospital and the officer asks you if you're wearing your seatbelt, say yes. So I ended up having to pay that seatbelt fine, and the DWI eventually got reduced to a careless and reckless, and so I don't count that one. But it was somewhat traumatic for my family. Later on, I'll tell you a story about my grandmother. There's a couple of stories I want to tell that I don't want to forget to say. One of them was after she had passed away. We were cleaning out some of her belongings and such. She was going through her stuff, and they found a piece of literature. She had some literature from Al-Anon. And we found that years after that DWI. And I said, I don't know if she ever went to Al-Anon or not, but it kind of, it spoke to me because I was in AA at that time when we found that literature. Another thing I discovered, which I'm kind of ashamed to admit, I didn't know what my grandmother's birthday was. And I learned what her birthday was. And it's August 1st, my sobriety date. And when I learned that, it hit me pretty hard between the eyes. I don't believe in coincidences quite like that. And so as the years go by, my escapades get worse. The penalties for drinking get worse and worse. I kind of thought that the trouble that I had was kind of just came with the territory. Bad luck, be more careful next time. That was kind of my attitude. It wasn't so much the world's picking on me, it was that I need to be more careful. And so I would do things to try to be more careful. One of them was, well, tonight I'm only going to drink beer. And that made good sense until I started drinking beer. And then it became obvious that I needed to start drinking liquor too. And once I got into that, there's no telling what was going to happen. I'd make promises to myself that I wasn't going to do any other outside issues. And all that made good sense until I started drinking. And the other thing that would happen to me is I would have these nights of drinking where I would get to a place where, and it's happened a lot, where I was the last one drinking. I was the only one still drinking. Everybody else had left or they had passed out or whatever, and it's just me. And this was happening at a fairly young age. I'd be like 17 or 18. And I remember drinking, we had a keg one time, a 40-gallon keg, I think it was. And we were trying to drink the whole thing, or maybe it was 20-gallon, I don't remember. But we was trying to drink the whole thing, and we couldn't do it. It was just a handful of us. And I stayed up all night trying to drink that keg dry. And I remember it was just me and the dog. Everybody else was passed out. And I'm sitting there drinking, looking at the dog, and the sun starts coming up. Sunrise. And I was drinking like that as a teenager. It was like that sense of craving that would happen to me, and that phenomenon of craving. I just didn't realize what was taking place. And I just thought I was having a good time, or trying to have a good time. And it started affecting my work. I started showing up still drunk from the night before. And I worked in construction, so it's kind of dangerous working drunk. And I worked for my father. And I remember one time I showed up drunk, and he fired me. But he told me not to drive. He told me to go get in the truck. So I went and got in the truck, and a few hours later, he come to the truck and said, "All right, you're rehired." Yeah, after I slept it off, he rehired me. I guess he thought about it. And I went went back to work for him. And but I just crazy stuff like that. Other thing happened to me was I got my second DWI at I think I was 19, and this time was a little bit different because I had driven a long ways from home, and I remember calling my father, and I remember him telling me when he answered the phone, I told him what had happened, and he said, well, such and such got you in there, some person's name. They can get you out. And he hung up on me. And no, that person didn't get me in there. My drinking's what got me in there. I remember the next day they let me out, and I couldn't drive because they took my driver's license. And this guy had to call his wife to come get him. And she came all the way down there to come, and she's got 2 little kids, toddlers. And I didn't think about it at the time, but I think about that now, the trouble that my drinking caused somebody else. What that must have looked like on the other end. But, and I've learned through, being in AA and just kind of doing step work and listening to stories and things such as that my alcoholism affects everyone around me. Everyone suffers on account of my alcoholism. And and I didn't know that at the time I was going through it. I thought that, I'm just hurting myself, and if everybody would just kind of leave me alone, they'll be okay. Just let me do my thing. I didn't realize how much harm I was causing others. I ended up having to go to an outpatient treatment program with that DWI, and what that looked like was there was a counselor, and he was sober. He was an actual alcoholic. It was a real bad case. He had been a bank executive in New York City and had lost it all, became homeless. He lost it all, and he got sober and ended up becoming a counselor. And so he told a lot of stories and such as that, and it just made me think about my drinking. I was only like 19 at the time, 18 or 19, can't remember exactly. And I got sentenced to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to go to 12 meetings, and so I had to get a paper signed, right? And so I went to 12 meetings, all of them in less than a week. So I was going to more than one a day. And then I came back and turned in my paper. And for some reason, I stopped drinking. I don't know exactly why, but I stopped drinking. And I started going to a church, and I started praying and stuff like that, and asking for help, because I didn't want to drink. And so I got sober. But I didn't go to AA. And I didn't know it at the time that I needed something more than what I had. I thought that I would be okay if I just didn't drink, And so I didn't. And I didn't understand the obsession. Because, it's kind of easy to understand the craving, because when I drink I get thirsty. That's pretty easy to understand. But what I didn't understand was the obsession of the mind and what that looks like. But what that looks like to me is, and what happens to me is, I have a brain that will lie to me. It will absolutely tell me that a drink is what I need. Not only will it not hurt me, but I need it. And that's what happened. But it snuck up on me. It wasn't that clear. What happened was, after a few months, I was sober maybe 9 months, maybe longer. And I started realizing, my brain started thinking that I must have overreacted. That, if you were really that bad, there's no way you could have stayed sober this long. And so my mind started telling me these lies, and I started believing them. And the lies got more and more deep. Eventually, I was convinced that I wasn't an alcoholic, and that I needed. And once that happened, I had to go try it again. I had to go, just like in our literature, it says that if you're not convinced, that you can try some controlled drinking to find out. It says go into a bar, and I'm not recommending it, but that's what I did. Exactly what I did. I had to go try it. And it started out with a 6-pack of Samuel Adams. I heard a story not too long ago, I don't remember who it was, might have been somebody in this room, told the story that that's what they started back on, Samuel Adams. I was like, man, I identify. And I drank 2 of them, and nothing happened. Everything was fine. Obviously, I've overreacted. And so the next time I had to try some more, and eventually that 6-pack turned into a 12-pack. And the amazing thing with me was, within 30 days or so, I was drinking every day. And it was like I had never stopped. It was as if that year did not exist. It was like I had drank the whole year, because I was worse than ever. And it didn't really convince me of anything. This amazing thing of how alcoholism is to me is I didn't even think anything of it. I just kept going. I didn't even try to entertain not drinking or trying to go back and get sober or anything. I just kept going. And and it immediately got worse. My hangovers got so bad that every day I'd wake up so sick that I just couldn't even brush my teeth or drink water or anything. I would gag on it. The thought of drinking would just disgust me, and I would swear it off and say, I'm not going to do this again today. I'm just not going to do it. And as the day would go on, that brain, that obsession, that my mind would turn on me again. And it would just start realizing, as I start feeling better, that I've overreacted again. That it really wasn't that bad. That you're going to do better this time. You're going to make it work, And I'd start telling myself lies like, I need to drink on a full stomach. I don't need to drink on an empty stomach. And before I go to bed, I need to take and drink plenty of water so I won't be so dehydrated in the morning. And I need to take a couple of aspirin before I go to bed, so my head, it's not hurting in the morning. And I would just make these plans. And I would work that day and finish the day out. And before I would get off and work, I'd want to drink so bad I could hardly stand it. And I'd get in the car to drive home where the alcohol was. And as I'm getting in the car, I would start feeling better already, as I know I'm going to get it. And I go and get it, and I get it in my hands, and I feel better again. And I take some slugs off of that, and then I go to get in the shower to get cleaned up, and I take the drink in there with me. Do some real social drinking. Taking showers and drinking in the shower. And I would just continue to drink, and it was just one after the other. And at the time, I had a girlfriend, and if she didn't make the food pretty quick, I was going to drink my dinner that night. That's the way I drank. And I did that every day. And this went on for not weeks and months. This went on for years. You know, this kind of behavior just went on, and it didn't change. It just didn't change. It did get worse, I guess you would say. I lacked control. I tried to go into a bar and drink 2 beers. I promised myself I was going to do this. I was going to go in there and have 2. I was going to be a good boy because wife was out of town and I was doing the driving, and I was going to go in there and do this. And I went in there to do that, and I went in maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock at night to do this controlled drinking. And when I left, it was 2:30 in the morning, and I was because the bar was closing, and I had been drinking that entire time. So it was as if when I tried to control it, it was more out of control. When I tried to rein it in, it got worse. It was like I showed even less control when I tried to control, which was baffling to me. Got another DWI that night. I ended up going to another outpatient treatment, and but this time was a little different because I was starting to see that it was a problem, that I was starting to have, some lack of control, because I remember my wife asking me why I had got that DWI when she came back. She was crying when she asked me. It was like that frothy emotional appeal that our book talks about. She wanted to know why, and I told her honestly, I did not know. I did not know why. I finally had an honest answer. I didn't know why. I was baffled as to why I got that DWI. I couldn't understand how I promised myself and how I was just going to do this, and I walked in there and I came out drunk. And that was the beginning of me questioning my ability to control it. And so I went into outpatient treatment, and I remember after being in there a while, we had went from a big group to just 3 of us, and it was like an more intensive, and in that group, they brought out the big book, and we actually had the big book in the meeting there, and we started reading it, and I had been to AA before, but I'd never seen the inside of a big book. And we started reading it there, and I started identifying with what Dr. Silkworth says at the beginning of the book, because he described that phenomenon of craving. And I remember experiencing that when I was a teenager. And it started describing things like their problems pile up on them, talking about the alcoholic, and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And I could identify with that. And that sense of ease and comfort. That's why I drank. That's why I drank every single time, was that feeling. I wanted that feeling. But the thing about it, my experience is that feeling got shorter and shorter to the point it was practically non-existent, to where I began to drink and just immediately would be drunk almost. Or I couldn't get there, And then once I got there, then I would be drunk. It's like I didn't get that sense of ease and comfort like I once did. It wasn't the same. And I guess some people describe that as alcohol quit working for them. I won't say it completely quit working, but it didn't work the same way. It was not the same. And the prices got so high to continue to drink. So this guy asked me one day, he says, are you drinking? And I said no. Because I thought he was asking me if I'm drinking that night. I knew better than to show up at the treatment meeting drunk. And he said, no, I know you're not drinking tonight. He said, are you drinking between these classes? I had them once a week. And I said, well, yeah. And because what I was doing at the time was I was doing weekends in the county jail, and I would detox in there, go in Friday, detox Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the first thing I'd do to let me out is go to the beer store across the street, which now I think is a Bondsman. But it was a beer store. And I'd go over there and I'd get me a Heineken. and that would get me home. And then I would continue to drink until the next Thursday. And then I would go back to treatment again, and I did that spiel over and over again. I'd already done this like, I think it was 8 times or something, maybe more. I can't remember how many of them classes I had, but I had a lot of them. But he said that if I didn't stop drinking, he was going to activate my probation, and that got my attention because I had several years of probation, and so I told him I would try. I didn't know if I could stop drinking or not, but I told him I would try, and the next day was August 1st of 97. I hadn't had a drink since that day, but I got up with the intention that I'm not going to drink today, and I made that decision. Went into the jail, got into jail, and after the jail, or actually something happened while I was at the jail. Every time before I would go into the jail, and I would just kind of play cards and be like the heroes. I'd walk in with cigarettes and matches and all that stuff and decks of cards and stuff. That's when you could smoke in there. But so everybody would like to see me come in, and I was playing this big shot role. This time was different. I went in and I wanted to try to be sober, and I was blessed that there was another guy in there that was in there for DWIs, and he wanted to stay sober too. And I don't remember if I took a big book in. I probably did. And him and I read that big book together that whole weekend. And I remember him talking about wanting to change his life, and I was sharing with him. It was like 2 brand new people, not even really in AA, but we had a big book, and we were just trying to learn about this. And I don't know if that's what changed my mind or what, but it definitely, there was some changing taking place. And then that Sunday when I got out, it was unusual because my girlfriend at the time, we've later got married, but my girlfriend at the time came to pick me up, but she wasn't driving, and that wasn't normal. And so I asked her what was the matter, and she told me over that weekend she had been kidnapped and assaulted over that weekend, and that all that kind of just piled on us. It was a real emotional deal. And I remember being in my apartment. I had an apartment above. There used to be a bar named Brooks down here downtown, and I had an apartment above that bar. And I wouldn't recommend having an apartment above a bar if you're trying to get sober. But I did, and I was standing in that apartment that Sunday, and it just felt like the world was on me. I just felt like the whole weight of the world was on my shoulders, and I just couldn't bear the weight anymore. That's what it felt like. And I just had this collapse, this emotional collapse, spiritual collapse. I mean, everything just kind of came down, and I kind of fell into this feeling of darkness, of just despair. If we look in Bill's story, he talks about that feeling of quicksand stretched out in all directions, and he talks about that sense of demoralization, that and I think about it as a darkness, just absolutely in the dark, and I fell to my knees, not because I wanted to get on my knees, I just couldn't stand up anymore. And I don't remember how long I was down there. I don't remember a whole lot about it. But I remember feeling like my life was over and that there was no hope. I do remember that my life was over and there was no hope. And this is what my life had become, absolute hopelessness. And I prayed a simple prayer, not unlike many others I'd heard talk about praying a prayer. And that prayer was, God help me. That's all I remember saying. And I stayed on those knees for a while, and nothing miraculous happened other than the darkness lit up a little. That's all I can say. And I had just a glimmer of hope. For some reason, just a glimmer of hope entered my heart or mind or whatever you want to say. And the idea kind of came over me that Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a meeting list the counselor had given me, and he had circled a couple of meetings. And the thought came over me that maybe, just maybe, those people in Alcoholics Anonymous might be able to help. And that was kind of the thought I had. I didn't have much hope that would be the case, but I had nothing else. Nothing else. And so I came to a Monday meeting here. We met in the basement like we do now, but it was around the corner down there. This part of the church wasn't even here then. And I remember walking down, we parked in the grass on the back side over there, and I walked down the steps into the basement there. And there was a circle of chairs in there. And I remember being quite afraid. And I walked in there, and there was an old guy. He was old then. And he just passed away a year ago or so, 2 years, whatever it's been. And he was almost 90. But I went in there, and he was sitting in there, and he was sitting in that circle of chairs, and I don't think he had these shoes on then. But he was sitting there, and he had his arms up on the chairs, and he motioned for me to come to him. And I walked over there to him, and he patted the chair right next to him. And he was the only one there. He patted that chair, and he told me these words. He said, "I've been saving this chair for you for years." And I walked over there, and I just collapsed in that chair. I don't remember anything else he said. But I know from that day to this day, I've been at home in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been a member. And I never felt a part of anything. And that sounds kind of dramatic, but I never even felt really a part of my family. But I've been at home in Alcoholics Anonymous ever since that day. And I don't know how to describe that. I can't really describe that. I can tell you what happened. I can tell you what I've done. But I can't explain to you why from that day to this day I knew that this is where I belonged. One thing that did happen, I'll say one thing that did happen is I got right in the center of that group. Right in the center. I would hear things in meetings that would make sense to me. Simple stuff like, when the wolf comes, he doesn't get the sheep in the middle of the pack. And what that meant to me was, and what it looked like was, I showed up early. I helped with making the coffee. I stayed late. Helped clean up. And even though it was somebody else's job, I was there to at least watch and take part in what was happening. And when I was doing those things, I felt okay. And then I would leave, and then my mind would go into chaotic, racing and not feeling right and being uncomfortable and anxious, having thoughts like, I don't know if I can go into a convenience store and walk past a beer cooler. Thoughts like that. Or I'd be sent to the grocery store to get a loaf of bread, and I'd have to shield my eyes from the wine. I'd feel like it was going to reach out and get me drunk or something in those early days. And so I was still obsessed with alcohol. I didn't really have relief. And I would sit in meetings and hear others talk about the relief that they had and how they had no desire to drink, really didn't even think about it anymore. But that was not my experience. And I felt like I might be doing something wrong. But I was doing all the things you were saying. And, but I guess the part that I was missing was that no human power can relieve my alcoholism. It's not what I do. Some higher power's got to remove that. I can't do it. I can take a lot of actions, and I can ask for help, and I can do the steps, but a higher power has to remove that. And either the higher power is or he isn't. And for me, it took months. Literally took months. I wanted to drink for many months after getting sober. And I can't tell you exactly what happened, but I can tell you when I knew that I no longer wanted to drink. And that was somewhere, I want to say it was after the 5th step, but I believe it was during step 9. It took me a long time to get through that 4th step because I procrastinated. You know, it probably took me 3 months and 1 day to do a 4th step. And then I finally got it done, and I did that 5th step with a home group member here. And I'm forever grateful for him listening to my 5th step. And then just 6 and 7 started 8 and 9. And somewhere, just one day, and I don't remember what I was doing, but I remember thinking, when's the last time I thought about drinking? That's kind of how it just came over me. It's like, when's the last time I thought about drinking? And I was racking my brain. I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember when the last time was. And it just kind of came over me, and I realized that maybe this is what they're talking about. And the obsession, I know now, the obsession had been removed. And I knew it wasn't anything I'd done other than just practicing the steps and praying and doing the things that we talk about doing in meetings all the time. I was just doing those things. And that obsession got removed. And and to me, that's the greatest gift that I can think of that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me, is that obsession to drink being removed. I no longer live in bondage of I can't drink, or I want to drink. You know, I was always plagued with one or the other. And or my day might look like, oh man, isn't it wonderful? I'm not drinking today. But that changed to a point of, yes, it's great I'm sober and I don't want to drink, but it's not something I obsess over anymore. It's not an issue. It's like our literature says, I've been placed into a place of safety where I can go anywhere I want to in the world and not be afraid of drinking. I've been to some places that a lot of people would think was crazy to go. They never wanted to drink at all. It never even really crossed my mind. And usually the only time it crosses my mind now is when I'm in an AA meeting and we're talking about it. I mean, every once in a while I'll see something on TV and like, man, that sure looks good. And I start thinking about wearing handcuffs. And it don't look so good then. It's one reason why. Where's Jenny at? She's in the back. She mentioned corrections where it's one reason. I mean, it ain't the only reason, but it's one reason why I go into a jail is to remember where I came from. I'm never confused about knowing that I could easily be in one of those cells right now. And my sponsor tells me that, and he's been sober, he's coming up on 50 years, that if it can happen to another alcoholic, he considers it can happen to him, whether he's been sober 49 years or not. If it can happen to another alcoholic, it can happen to him. And I kind of think about the same thing. And that's one reason why I continue doing all the same stuff I do. But also, so that clock's fast. I am going to finish up right now, but to tell one story, I talked to my daughter this morning, and she lives in Texas now with her boyfriend. One of the closest times I've ever been to a higher power where I felt the presence of love, and that's how I define God as love, was in the delivery room. And I remember when she was born, and I remember there was like chaos in that delivery room. All the sounds of her being born and all that. And I remember the doctor took her and held her in his arms. And I got to thinking, I'm like, it's silent. Shouldn't the baby be crying? And then he turned her over and cleaned her mouth out, and she let out this most beautiful sound I ever heard in my life. The sound of a baby crying for the first time. And I remember the feeling in that delivery room of love just filled that room. I could feel that as a child was born. And I felt the presence of God. And it was a powerful moment. And when I talk to her on the phone, I think about those times. AA's given me so much. I couldn't even begin to describe. If you look at my life, it's like, how do you get from here to here? It's not possible. It's not possible. You start where I was at and you end up where I am now. It's not. But with God, all things are possible. And He's taken a broken man and He changed me. And if I hadn't changed, I would still be drinking, because the same man will drink again. So I have to change. And that's what this program's for. And it's what a higher power can do. And so I thank you all for listening.